Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into one of history's most controversial figures, a king whose story is a tangled web of ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. We're talking about Richard III, the last Plantagenet king of England. For centuries, he's been painted as the ultimate villain, the hunchbacked monster who murdered his own nephews. But is that the whole story? Was he really the Machiavellian tyrant Shakespeare made him out to be? Or was he a victim of some of the most successful propaganda in history? Let's find out. To really understand Richard, we have to go back to the world he was born into. 15th century England, a nation torn apart by the Wars of the Roses. This wasn't just a simple conflict. It was a brutal, decades-long civil war between two rival branches of the royal family. The House of Lancaster, symbolized by the red rose, and the House of York, symbolized by the white rose. Richard was born a Yorkist in 1452. The youngest son of Richard, Duke of York. His childhood was anything but peaceful. His father and one of his older brothers were killed in battle when he was just 8 years old. He and his brother George were forced to flee to the continent for safety. This early exposure to violence, political instability, and the constant threat of death shaped him profoundly. Things started to look up for the Yorks when Richard's eldest brother, Edward, seized the throne to become King Edward IV. Richard grew up to be Edward's most loyal and trusted supporter, while his other brother, George, Duke of Clarence, was notoriously unreliable and even treacherous. Richard proved himself to be a skilled military commander and a capable administrator. He was given vast lands and power in the north of England, an area he governed so effectively that he was genuinely popular there. He was seen as fair, just, and dedicated. He fought alongside Edward in key battles, helping to secure the Yorkist crown, not once, but twice. By all accounts, he was the model of a loyal younger brother, fiercely devoted to his king and his family. There was little to suggest the villain he would later become. The turning point came in April 1483. King Edward IV died suddenly at the age of just 40, leaving behind two young sons, the 12-year-old heir, Edward V, and his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York. The king's will named his brother, our Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector of the realm. His job was to govern the country until the young Edward V was old enough to rule on his own. And this is where the story gets really murky. The court was a viper's nest of political factions. The most powerful group was the Woodvilles, the family of Edward IV's queen, Elizabeth Woodville. They were ambitious and widely disliked by the old nobility, who saw them as upstarts. The Woodvilles moved quickly to try and sideline Richard and control the new young king. Richard, believing the Woodvilles were plotting to remove him from power, and perhaps even kill him, acted decisively. He intercepted the young king on his journey to London, arrested his Woodville guardians, and brought Edward V to the Tower of London. Now, at the time, the Tower wasn't just a prison. It was also a royal residence, a fortress, and a secure place for a monarch before their coronation. So, initially, this wasn't as sinister as it sounds. Soon after, the young king's brother, Richard, also joined him in the Tower. The stage was set for Edward V's coronation. But then, a bombshell dropped. A clergyman came forward with a shocking claim. King Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was invalid. Why? Because Edward had supposedly been pre-contracted to marry another woman before he secretly wed Elizabeth. In the eyes of the church at that time, a pre-contract was as binding as a marriage. If this were true, it meant that Edward and Elizabeth's children, including the two young princes in the Tower, were illegitimate. And if they were illegitimate, they couldn't inherit the throne. Parliament, known as the Three Estates, officially declared the princes illegitimate in a document called Titulus Regis. With Edward IV's children out of the picture, and his other brother George having been executed for treason years earlier, the next in line to the throne was, you guessed it, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. He was offered the crown, and after a show of reluctance, he accepted, becoming King Richard III on July 6, 1483. The two young princes, Edward and Richard, were seen playing in the Tower grounds for a few weeks, and then they vanished. They were never seen again. So, what happened to the princes in the Tower? This is the great mystery at the heart of Richard's story. The traditional Tudor version of events is that Richard, paranoid about his claim to the throne, ordered his nephews to be murdered. This is the version that Shakespeare immortalized in his play, making Richard one of literature's greatest villains. He paints a picture of a ruthless tyrant who would stop at nothing to secure his power. And let's be honest, Richard had the motive and the opportunity. The princes were a direct threat to his reign. As long as they were alive, there was always the risk that someone could rally support for them and try to put Edward V back on the throne. Getting rid of them would have been the most politically expedient move. Many contemporaries, even those initially loyal to Richard, came to believe he was responsible. However, there's no concrete proof. No bodies were ever definitively identified at the time. No confession was ever made, and no eyewitness ever came forward with a credible account. This lack of evidence has led to other theories. Some historians argue that the murder was carried out by one of Richard's rivals, perhaps Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, who initially supported Richard but then rebelled against him. The idea is that Buckingham might have killed the princes and framed Richard to undermine his rule. Another, more controversial theory points the finger at the man who ultimately defeated Richard, Henry Tudor, who would become King Henry VII. Henry had a very weak claim to the throne himself. When he defeated Richard and became king, the two princes would have been just as big a threat to him as they were to Richard. It's possible that the princes were still alive when Henry took the throne, and he was the one who quietly had them disposed of. What's suspicious is that Henry VII, despite using the princes' disappearance as powerful anti-Richard propaganda, never launched a formal investigation or tried to find their bodies. It was almost as if he didn't want the mystery solved. Whatever the truth, the disappearance of the princes destroyed Richard's reputation. His reign, which was actually quite short, just over 2 years, was plagued by rebellion and instability. He tried to be a good king. He passed laws promoting justice for the common person, reformed the legal system to protect people from extortion, and promoted trade. He was a devoutly religious man and a patron of the arts. But he could never escape the shadow of his missing nephews. His downfall came at the hands of Henry Tudor. Henry landed in Wales with a small army, gathering support as he marched through the country. The final showdown took place on August 22, 1485, at the Battle of Bosworth Field. The battle was a close-run thing, but at a critical moment, one of Richard's key noble families, the Stanleys, betrayed him and switched sides to support Henry. Seeing the battle turning against him, Richard did something incredibly brave, or perhaps incredibly foolish. He spotted Henry Tudor's banner across the field and led a desperate cavalry charge directly at his rival. Aiming to end the war with a single blow, he almost succeeded, cutting down Henry's standard-bearer and getting within striking distance of Henry himself. But he was surrounded, pulled from his horse, and hacked to death. He was the last English king to die in battle. After his death, the victorious Tudors launched one of the most effective smear campaigns in history. They controlled the narrative, commissioning histories and plays. Most famously, Shakespeare's Richard III, that painted him as a deformed, evil monster. They made up the story about him being born with a full set of teeth and a hunchback propaganda to suggest he was evil from birth. For 500 years, this was the image that stuck. But then, in 2012, something incredible happened. Archaeologists excavating a car park in the city of Leicester discovered a skeleton. Through DNA testing and analysis of the bones, they confirmed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that these were the remains of King Richard III. The discovery was astonishing. His skeleton showed he had severe scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, which would have made one shoulder higher than the other, but he was not a hunchback. It also showed he died from brutal battlefield wounds, consistent with the historical accounts. Finding his body sparked a massive reassessment of his life and reign. People began to question the Tudor narrative and look at the evidence more objectively. So, who was the real Richard III? A bloodthirsty tyrant who murdered children for a crown? Or a loyal brother and capable ruler who was forced into a corner by ruthless political enemies and later vilified by his successors? The truth is, we'll probably never know for sure. He was likely a man of his time, ambitious, pious, brave, and probably ruthless when he felt it was necessary. The world he lived in was a dangerous one, where a single mistake could cost you your life. Perhaps he was both a victim of circumstance and a perpetrator of dark deeds. What's clear is that his story is far more complex than the simple caricature of a villain we've even fed for centuries. He remains one of history's most fascinating and enduring enigmas. What do you guys think? Was Richard a monster or a maligned king? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.